Hey everybody, it's Christina. Welcome back to my channel. I am super excited and extremely honored that Spellbinders asked me to do a few projects using their newest release. So we have a new release of the stitched alphabet dies, and these are dies that are each of the different letters are sold separately, and each one of them comes with the plate that will cut out your die, as well as holes that you can use for stitching, or you could just leave it the way they are, as well as a shadow of this. So for this particular one, I have a couple different options, but I'm going to go with the H and the I. So we're going to just do a nice little simple, high card today. Also in the release is the Glimmer, stitched alphabet glimmer plates as well. I'm also going to bring in a couple of other Spellbinders dies. I have these fancy edge ovals, which are super adorable. Every other die, so the largest die has a scallop, the next die down has a straight edge with a faux stitching, so we're going to use these. And then I also have these essential rectangles, which again, every other die, so we have a plain cut, and then the next die down is going to be one that has a circle punch, which you can actually even stitch that if you want to, but we're not going to stitch those. And then I'm using also some of Spellbinders colored cardstock. This is the blue spruce cardstock, and it is gorgeous. I love this color. And then I have some white cardstock here as well. So we're going to, I'll set this one aside. Let's set up our white cardstock. I'm going to cut the H and the I in the white cardstock. And then I'm also going to cut one of the dies from the oval set. And we're going to cut that into the white cardstock as well. For the other piece of white cardstock, I'm going to use two of the rectangle dies. I'm going to use the largest straight edge die, which is 1/4 of an inch smaller than a card front. So that'll go on here, and then we'll also layer in the circles in the center of that, and then we'll have 2 layers. So it'll cut out the outside layer, then we'd have the inside layer, which is going to be the circles. We're going to cut that out on white cardstock. And then for our blue spruce cardstock, we are going to cut out the outline of our H and our I. And then we're also going to cut out a larger layer of the scallops in this color cardstock as well. So I'm going to go ahead and die cut those, and then we can start doing our stitching on our H and I. So I have all of my pieces die cut. I have my background piece, which has the larger cut so it's about 1/4 of an inch smaller than my card base. And then I die cut the second layer, which cuts out all those little circles. And we could stitch those if we want to, but I am not going to. I'm just going to leave them just the way they are. And then I have my ovals here. They're all ready to go. I have my shadow of my 2 alphabets. And then I have my actual pieces that have the punches for the stitching. I'm going to go ahead and start stitching. I am just using embroidery floss that you would use if you're into doing counted cross stitch. This is what you would do. And if you're into counted cross stitching, it usually tells you how many strands of the thread you need. So the floss or thread that you use for counted cross stitching breaks apart into different strains. So you would actually, most times you use 2 of them. So what I did was I pulled off 2 of them, but I doubled it up. So once I thread it through the needle, it actually turns out to be 4 strands. It's only because I cut off a piece that was way too large, and I figured I might as well just do 2 and then fold it in half, and then I'll have the 4 strands. So 4 seems to be what I like the best as far as the fullness of the thread when we go through our die cut. And I'm going to go through and just do this first flower with you that's on our die cut, and then I'll do the rest. I'll just speed up the video for that. But what I do is I pull this through, and I'm going to hold on to my thread in the back. You could tape it down if you want to. I don't do that. I just hold on to it. And then as I'm going through, I will then catch my thread with all of the different times that I pass through. So I went up through the middle and then through one of the holes, and now I'm just going to keep going ahead and doing that. We're just going to end up through the middle every single time. So we come up through one of the sides, and then we go down in the middle of that flower. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to slowly catch on to that piece. So I already, hopefully you can see that I've already hooked onto that piece of thread. so I don't even have to hold on to it anymore. And as a matter of fact, I could cut this off if I want to, but I'm just gonna hold it for a little bit longer, and then I'll definitely be able to catch it even a couple more times as I'm going through and stitching out these little flowers. So I'm always coming up through on the side of the flower and then down through the middle. If I try to come up through the middle, I'm gonna sometimes probably grab through some strands of the thread, and it's better to come up through one of the outside and then down through the middle. So I am going to just end this flower, and then I'm going to go ahead and stitch out the flowers for the rest of this letter.
This town's so lame, I'm feeling so wired. It's 4 a.m., I'm not even tired. We're in your car, we can drive.
So once I have this one side down, before I'm going to start doing the other side, but I need to cut off my end. What I do is I just run through the back of some of the stitches, and I'm just putting my needle through, and then we can pull that through and then just trim this off. I'm going to trim off the top parts too from when I first started the stitch, and then I can go ahead and thread my needle and do another section on this H, and then I'll also go through and do the I as well. So I finished up all my stitching. I added some foam adhesive to the back so we can pop these up off of our shadowed piece. And I just love these. These are so adorable and so much fun. You can sit here and do the entire alphabet if you wanted to. I love this blue spruce cardstock. Such a pretty cardstock. All right, so the next thing we have to do is we're ready to start putting our card together, but we got to create our card base. And I am going to do that with a full piece of the blue spruce cardstock. And we're going to cut this in half. I'm going to cut this at the 5.5 inch mark. And then we're going to score it at 4 1/4. And I am going to score on both sides because this cardstock is a little thick and I don't want it to crack. So I'm going to score on both sides before I do my folds. So we have our card base, and I'm going to go ahead and start putting this together. So I'm going to layer down this piece, and I'm going to do this straight onto my cardstock, and I'm going to use my precision craft glue here. Just to keep it real, I literally put my adhesive down on the wrong side of my cardstock. So I make mistakes all the time. The wonderful world of editing videos shows that it looks like I never make a mistake, but I always do. And I'm just gonna take this and add some more adhesive on here onto the right side. And we're gonna adhere this down. And as I was trying to say is that I like to use a liquid adhesive because it gives me some time to make sure it's even on the front of my card. I'm also going to do some adhesive onto the back of my smaller oval and layer that onto my scalloped piece right in the center. And then we're going to add some foam adhesive to the back of this. We can add a little bit of dimension, a little bit more dimension I should say, since we already added some foam adhesive to our alphabets. We're going to go ahead and center that in our card. And then we're going to adhere down our H and our I. want to make it so this is a little bit more center. So sometimes you just have to kind of play with it, get it in the right spot. That's where using that liquid adhesive is better, because then you can kind of move things around a little bit, give yourself a little bit of time. And I don't like that it's not perfectly straight there. And now what I could do is, if I wanted to, I can add some additional sequins or something like that, but I think I'm gonna leave it just like this. Make it a nice simple card, can be used for any occasion, just something to send to somebody, just to say hi. You can even add another piece of white cardstock on the inside where you can write your little message to somebody. So for my next card, I'm going to be using the B and E from the Stitched Alphabets, and then I'm also going to use one of the sentiments from the Stitched Glimmer set. Got my Glimmer Hot Foil plate set up and it's ready to go. And I'm using a piece of cardstock. So this is just my Nina 110 pound cardstock. I've used this before with my Glimmer plates. And I am going to take a little piece of low tack tape. So this is just mint tape. And I am going to, just to kind of make it easier for myself, I am going to actually take that, and I'm making it so it's face down. I'm going to grab that foil and then center it onto this piece of cardstock, because I want to actually make a strip that's going to go across the front of my card. I'm going to put this on my Glimmer Hot Foil system. I'm going to hit timer. Oops, yeah, actually you're supposed to do it upside down. We're going to do it this way. I'm going to add my 2 foil plates. So I have my thin shim and my regular spacer shim here. And once this stops flashing, I'm going to run this through my die cut machine to transfer the foil onto my cardstock. Okay, so I have that all run through. I pulled out my little heat mat here. I'm going to turn this off because we are done with our machine. We're going to grab this and we're going to pull off. And now we have Legendary in that shiny. And if I didn't mention, I used the pewter foil. And I am going to set that aside because we're not going to be using that right away, but I just wanted to get that done. I'm going to use this embossing folder. It's called Diamond Plaid, and it's a 5.5 by 8.5 inch embossing folder. So what you could do is actually take a card base, an A2 size card base, and emboss the entire card base, which is great, but I am going to just do a A2 size, so 4.25 by 5.5. So I ran this through my embossing folder, and oh, I just love this style. It's so nice, and it's going to make a great background. But I do want to cut this down. I don't want it to be the full 4.25 by 5.5. So I'm going to grab my paper cutter, and I'm going to cut this down to, we'll cut it down to 4 by 5.25. So if it's 1/4 inch smaller than an A2 size card. The next thing I'm going to do is die cut my B and the E, and I'm just going to use that one piece of cardstock that I did the Legendary on, and we'll run this through our die cutting machine as well. I also want to cut the shadow cutouts of the B and the E using this cardstock. This is Beeswax by Spellbinders, and Spellbinders cardstock is definitely becoming quickly one of my absolute favorite cardstocks. And I'm going to cut this down so it is my card base as well as my piece, so I can die cut my pieces. So I want this to be a top folding card. So I'm going to cut this at 4.25. And then I am going to just cut enough off that I need for my letters here. Like I said, this is just for the shadow pieces. And then we have our card base, which will score at 5.5. So I'm just going to score this at 5.5, and this becomes my top folding card. I love this shade of yellow, so pretty. And then I'll go ahead and run my B and my E through my die cutting machine. All right, so we have our B and our E outlines all done. I'm going to set this card base aside, and we're going to bring in our letters, and we're going to start doing our threading on these letters. I'm just using this, the Home Decor color collection of the DMC floss, or thread, or whatever you want to call it. And we are going to pull out enough so that we can do our B and the E. Now the first card I made, my thread was from just a kit that I had around from a long time ago for a cross stitching and it didn't have any yellow in it. So I am going to pull this apart and we're going to pull off 2 strands. And then I'm going to thread this onto my needle. And then I'm going to go ahead and start doing my stitches.
I'm waiting at the doorstep, I'm finally home. I've been gone for too long. Standing here a while just to take it all in. Radio's playing our song.
So I finished stitching out my B and my E, and I added some foam adhesive to the back of those letters, and I'm just going to put them onto my yellow cardstock that we cut out with the shadow version of the letters. And then I'm going to set those aside and we'll start putting our card base together. So I took this piece of the embossed cardstock and cut it down so it's 1/4 inch smaller than my front of my card. And I'm going to use some tape runner to adhere this down. Actually, we'll use some liquid adhesive just because of all the texture and we want to make sure it has a good grip. And then we can adhere this right to the front of our card. I love this embossed image, or this embossing folder. Super pretty. So hopefully the camera can pick up the embossing there. And then we're going to go ahead and adhere down our B and our E. Making sure they're center in our card. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut out the legendary on my cutting board here. And I'm just lining this up. What I love about this cutting board is it has that wire in the middle so I can see much easier where I'm cutting. And we're going to cut on both sides. And then we have our sentiment. I think that I am going to put that right underneath, but I'm going to do a little flag end on there. So if you've never done a flag end before, it's just a quick snip on each side. And then if you take your scissors and just do a little snip in the center on both sides. I'm going to make sure we're pretty even there. So we're going to snip this one. And then we take our scissors and just cut into that snipped area. And then we can create those banner sides or banner ends. Of course, if you have a die, you can also do it that way, but I didn't want to drag out another die, so this is the easy way. And then we can put the legendary underneath, and I'm going to pop that up as well so it's got some dimension. I'm just going to use some of this foam adhesive. And I am going to give this a couple snips with my scissors because we don't need it that thick. And then we'll put legendary right underneath. Making sure that's pretty close to the center. And the last thing I'm going to do is just add a couple of these gems onto here. I wanted to use my little Tim Holtz paper pick, but I do not know where it went to. It was just here. So I'm just going to put these down using my tweezers. And we're going to put down a couple on each size. I love the simplicity of it, and this beeswax colored cardstock has become my absolute favorite. And playing with these dies are so much fun. It's so relaxing just to sit there and kind of stitch out, you know, a couple of words, watching some TV or YouTube videos or whatever it is you like to do when you've got a little process that you're working on. So those are both of my cards using the new releases of the Stitched Alphabet dies, as well as the Stitched Alphabet Glimmer plates as well. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I love that you can buy each of these dies separately so you can create whatever words that you want using those dies, and plus sitting around playing with the stitching is so much fun. I will leave a link to all the supplies used in today's video down below in the YouTube description, as well as in the coordinating blog post for today's video. Thanks everybody for watching, and I'll catch you next time.